A legacy isn't something you inherit. It is something you forge through years of struggle, sacrifice, and an unwavering iron will. Watch the epic tales of those who dared to leave their mark on history. Click subscribe now and help us build a lasting legacy together.
My sister called me at 7 in the morning on the day I was supposed to sign my first major client contract. She didn't say hello. She said, "We need you to postpone your meeting. My husband's investment presentation is today, and Dad wants the whole family there to show support. Don't be selfish for once." I held the phone against my ear and didn't say a word. On the other end, I could hear my father in the background saying, "She'll come. She always does." I set the phone face down on my kitchen counter, finished my coffee, and drove to my meeting. They thought my silence was obedience. They had no idea it was the last time I would ever rearrange my life for theirs. Have you ever been treated like the backup plan in your own family? Like you only matter when someone else needs something from you? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. And for most of my life, I was the family's invisible infrastructure. The one who handled the problems nobody wanted to deal with, got none of the credit, and was expected to smile while doing it. It started when I was 17. My sister Dana was 22, newly married to a man named Marcus who had big ideas and an even bigger mouth. My parents adored Marcus. My father called him the son I never had at the rehearsal dinner, which was a strange thing to say, given that he had me standing 5 feet away, but that was how things worked in our family. Dana was the golden daughter. Marcus, by extension, became the golden son-in-law, and I was the one who got handed the catering invoice and told to figure it out because I was good with numbers. I was 17. I was good with numbers because I had been doing the household bookkeeping since I was 14. Not because anyone asked me, but because someone had to and no one else would. My parents spent that decade making a series of increasingly reckless financial decisions in service of Marcus's vision of himself. He had a new business idea every 18 months. A food truck, a cryptocurrency consulting firm, a line of artisanal hot sauces, each one launched with a family dinner where my parents announced they were investing in his future. Each one quietly dissolved within a year while my parents absorbed the loss and moved on to the next dream without ever acknowledging what the last one had cost them. Meanwhile, I got a full academic scholarship to state school, graduated early, passed my CPA exam on the first attempt, and joined a mid-sized regional accounting firm where I worked my way up to senior auditor by 28. I bought a small house. I paid off my student loan in 2 years. I started building a client base on the side, doing forensic accounting consulting for businesses that suspected internal fraud. My family's response to all of this was a kind of polite indifference. My mother would mention Dana's kitchen renovation. In the same breath, she forgot to ask how my promotion went. My father would listen to Marcus pitch another venture with the same starry-eyed attention he had never once turned in my direction. I told myself it didn't matter. I had built something real. I was proud of it. Their approval was a currency I had stopped needing a long time ago. But nothing fully prepared me for what they did. The spring I turned 31. I had been working for 8 months on landing Harwick & Cole, a regional manufacturing company that had been hemorrhaging money and couldn't figure out where it was going. It was the biggest independent consulting contract of my career, the kind of engagement that would let me leave the firm entirely and go out on my own. I had done the preliminary analysis, presented twice to their board, and the final signing meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning in April. Dana called on Wednesday night. I let her finish. She said my father wanted the whole family present at Marcus's investor presentation the next morning because it was an important milestone and my absence would look bad. She said Marcus had secured a meeting with a group of regional venture capitalists who were interested in his new project, a property management software company called Cornerstone Solutions. She said my mother had already made a comment about how I was always too busy for family. I said I had a client meeting that I could not move. She said, "Claire, this is Marcus's biggest opportunity yet. The least you can do is show up for 2 hours." I said, "Good luck tomorrow," and ended the call. I signed Harwick & Cole the next morning. It was the largest fee I had ever invoiced. I drove home, sat in my driveway, and let myself feel it for about 4 minutes before my phone lit up with a text from my mother that said simply, "You hurt your father today." I put the phone in my glove compartment and went inside. What I didn't tell my family then, and what they had no way of knowing, was that Harwick & Cole was not just my new client. It was also, as of 6 weeks earlier, a portfolio company of Greystone Capital Partners, the same venture capital Brook that Marcus was presenting to that very morning. I found out because one of the Greystone partners, a woman named Diane, had been copied on an introductory email from the Harwick and Cole board chair. Diane had reached out to me directly to discuss the engagement. During that call, she mentioned, almost as an aside, that they had a full slate of pitches that week, including one from a local software startup. She didn't say the name. I didn't ask. But when I looked up Greystone's portfolio and upcoming meetings, Cornerstone Solutions was listed on their public calendar. My brother-in-law was walking into a room where I was now the trusted forensic expert for one of their existing investments. I sat with that information for 6 weeks. I did not tell anyone. I did not plan anything dramatic. I simply did my job. And my job, it turned out, was about to become very interesting. The escalation didn't start gradually. It started with a knock on my door on a Saturday morning 3 weeks after I signed the Harwick and Cole contract. I opened it to find my parents and Dana on my front porch and Marcus standing slightly behind them with his arms crossed, like a man who had been elected spokesman against his will. My father walked in without being invited. He sat down in the armchair in my living room like he owned it. "We need to talk about your attitude," he said. I stayed standing near the door. Dana said, "You embarrassed us. Diane from Greystone called Mom after the pitch meeting and mentioned you. She said you were working with one of their companies. Marcus's presentation didn't go the way he hoped, and now it looks like you poisoned the well." I looked at her for a moment. "I've been working with Harwick and Cole for 2 months. I signed them before Marcus ever scheduled that meeting." "That's not the point," my mother said. "The point is that Marcus walked in there, and they already had an opinion about our family because of you. You couldn't have waited. You couldn't have let him have this. Let him have a contract that had nothing to do with him." Marcus finally spoke. He stepped forward into the living room and said, "Look, Claire, I don't know what you told those people, but Diane made it very clear that they had concerns about the internal controls at Harwick, and that reflected on everyone associated with the company. I've been building that relationship for 4 months. 4 months. And you walked in there 2 weeks before my pitch with your little audit, and suddenly they're asking me questions about financial oversight like I'm a suspect?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. The rehearsed indignation, the absolute confidence that the world had conspired against him specifically. "They asked you about financial oversight because that is what venture capitalists do," I said. "They do due diligence." "Don't be condescending," Dana snapped. "I found irregularities in their receivables process," I said. "I reported them to the board because that is my job. If Greystone asked Marcus about financial oversight, it's because they're being responsible investors. That has nothing to do with me personally." "It has everything to do with you," my father said, his voice rising. "Your sister's husband needed that funding. Your family needed that. And you prioritized a client fee over your own blood." I took a breath. The familiar weight of that word, family, deployed like it always was in our house, as both a summons and a threat. "I'll think about what you've said," I told them. My father looked satisfied. He stood up, patted Marcus on the shoulder, and said, "Good. Because Marcus is going to need your help cleaning up the financial documentation for his next pitch round. You have the skills. Use them for the people who matter." They left. I locked the door. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up the Harwick and Cole client portal. I had been halfway through my full audit when the signing happened. In the weeks since, I had kept working through their accounts receivable records, vendor payment histories, and internal transfer logs. Something I had flagged 3 days earlier was still sitting in my notes, waiting for me to look closer. I had found a pattern I recognized. Not from Harwick and Cole. From something older, a vendor called Cornerstone Consulting Group. Not Cornerstone Solutions, but similar enough to catch my eye, had been listed in Harwick and Cole's records as receiving payments for systems integration consulting. The payments started 14 months ago. They totaled, across 6 invoices, just over $280,000. I had flagged it because there was no corresponding project file, no deliverable documentation, no internal communications referencing any systems integration work. The invoices were professionally formatted but thin. No line items, just amounts and dates. I ran a corporate record search on Cornerstone Consulting Group. It was registered in Delaware. The registered agent was a formation service, standard for shell companies. The listed principal was a name I didn't recognize. Then I checked the bank routing number on the oldest invoice. I had seen that routing number before. In my own family's financial records, which I had managed informally for years when my parents needed help. It belonged to a credit union account that Marcus had opened when he and Dana first got married. He had evolved. He wasn't routing invoices to his personal PayPal. He had built a shell company, Cornerstone Consulting Group, a name close enough to his actual business, Cornerstone Solutions, that anyone glancing at the records might assume it was related. 14 months of payments. $250,000 funneled from a manufacturing company's marketing and operations budget into an account only he controlled. I sat back in my chair. Outside, a neighbor's dog was barking at something. A perfectly ordinary Saturday, and I was looking at federal wire fraud. I did not feel triumphant. I felt something colder and quieter than that. I printed everything. Bank records, corporate filings, invoice copies, IP logs from the vendor portal showing that the invoices had been uploaded from a device registered to Marcus's home address. It was a substantial stack of paper, warm from the printer. Heavier than it looked. I placed it in a manila envelope and wrote 2 words on the outside. Due diligence. I called Diane at Greystone on Monday morning. I told her I had completed a review of a vendor payment pattern at Harwick & Cole that I believed warranted her attention before their next board meeting. I told her I was sending documentation. I told her she should involve legal counsel before reviewing it. She called me back in 40 minutes. Her voice was very controlled and very precise. She said, "Claire, I need you to understand what you found here." I said, "I understand exactly what I found." She said, "This is going to move quickly." I said, "I know." The Greystone annual investor reception was held every April at the Meridian Club downtown, a private event space that occupied the top 2 floors of a converted bank building. It was the kind of room where the lighting was soft and the suits were expensive, and every conversation was a transaction in progress. My firm had attended for 3 years running because 2 of my partners had client relationships that overlapped with Greystone's portfolio. This year, I was on the invitation list as a featured guest. Diane had asked me personally to attend. My family was also there. Dana and Marcus had been invited months earlier when Marcus's pitch for Cornerstone Solutions was still active. By the time the event came around, the pitch was dead. But the invitations had already gone out, and Marcus, being Marcus, saw no reason to decline. He had shown up to the rehearsal dinner of a marriage already collapsing. So he would certainly show up to a cocktail reception he hadn't earned. I arrived with my boyfriend Theo, who is a structural engineer and the calmest person I have ever met. We did not look like we were attending someone else's event. We looked like we belonged. I spotted my family across the room before they saw me. My mother was wearing the dress she saved for important occasions. My father had a glass of wine, and the expression he used when he wanted to look like he understood what people around him were talking about. Dana was watching Marcus work the room with the same quiet pride she had always directed at him, the kind that never once pointed itself in my direction. Marcus saw me first. He crossed toward me with a glass in his hand and a smile that had never once been genuine. "Claire," he said, holding out his hand like we were business associates at a neutral event. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I was invited," I said. "Right?" He glanced at Theo, assessed him, and looked back at me. "Listen, I hope we can move past all the tension. Dana and I want things to be normal again. We're family." There was that word. I smiled at him. "I hope the evening goes well for you," I said, and that was all. Across the room, Diane had stepped onto the small raised platform near the bar. She tapped her glass, and the room settled. She thanked the guests. She spoke briefly about Greystone's portfolio performance. She mentioned Harwick & Cole's strong turnaround numbers and noted the role of rigorous financial oversight in protecting investor value. She said that sometimes protecting value meant having uncomfortable conversations and that they were grateful for partners who took that responsibility seriously. Then she said, "I'd like to introduce Claire, our forensic accounting consultant on the Harwick & Cole engagement, who has agreed to say a few words about the importance of vendor due diligence." The spotlight, metaphorically, landed on me. I stepped up. I kept it brief. I talked about pattern recognition, about how fraud rarely looks like fraud at first. It looks like routine payments, familiar names, small inconsistencies that seem too minor to flag. I said the most dangerous assumption in financial oversight is that someone you trust wouldn't. I did not look at Marcus while I said it. I didn't need to. I felt the moment he understood. There was a shift in the room's energy, a small ripple. And when I stepped down and turned, I could see it on his face. The color had drained out of it. Diane rejoined me and said, quietly enough that only I could hear, "The attorneys will be reaching out to him tomorrow." The evidence package was sufficient for the DA's office. My mother found me 20 minutes later near the window. She had that look she got when she was deciding whether to attack or retreat. "What did you do?" she said. "My job," I said. "You destroyed him. You stood up there in front of everyone and you destroyed him." "I presented documentation of wire fraud to the relevant parties," I said. "The investigation did the rest. You did this on purpose." Her voice dropped. "You've always resented Dana. You've always resented that we supported her and Marcus." I looked at her. Outside the window, the city glittered in the dark in that impartial, indifferent way cities do. "I found evidence of a crime," I said. "I reported it. That is what I am required to do professionally and legally. If I'd concealed it and it came out later, I would have lost my license, my clients, and potentially faced criminal liability myself. I did exactly what anyone in my position was obligated to do." "You could have warned him," she said. "You could have come to us first and given him time to destroy evidence." She didn't answer. "Mom," I said, and I kept my voice level because I had had this argument in my head for about 10 years and I was tired of it. "You have spent my entire adult life asking me to be useful and then resenting me when my usefulness didn't serve the story you wanted to tell. I got scholarships and you talked about Dana's kitchen. I made partner track and you asked me to do Marcus's bookkeeping. I found $250,000 in fraud and you're asking me why I didn't protect him. I can't help you with that. That's something you'll have to work out on your own." She left without responding. I watched her find my father and say something to him and watch him look across the room at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Not anger, something closer to reckoning. Marcus was arrested 6 weeks later. The DA's office moved efficiently as they tend to do when the documentation is airtight. Wire fraud, false invoicing, tax evasion on the proceeds. His attorney negotiated as they always do, but the evidence was a wall with no doors in it. He accepted a plea, 18 months plus restitution. Dana filed for divorce 3 months after the arrest. I don't know exactly what she felt. We didn't talk much during that period. She called me once, late on a weeknight, and said, "Did you know before the reception?" I said, "I knew before I called Diane." There was a long silence. She said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I thought about that for a moment. "Because you would have told him," I said. "And then the money would have been moved, and the company dissolved, and the evidence would have been gone, and he would have done it to someone else." Another silence. "I know," she said finally. Her voice was very quiet. "I know you're right." She hung up. I held the phone for a moment and then set it down. My parents lost the investment they had made in Marcus over the years, not in a single dramatic moment, but in the slower, more ordinary way that bad investments always come due. The money they had poured into his ventures over a decade was simply gone. They were in their late 60s, with less saved than they should have had, and a rented condo they could afford on my father's pension. Barely. Theo and I had bought a small commercial property 2 years earlier as an investment. When the tenant moved out, we had been deciding what to do with the space. After everything that happened, I called the county's Department of Social Services and asked what kind of tenant would get the most use out of a ground floor commercial space with a small parking lot in a mid-sized residential neighborhood. They connected me with a nonprofit that ran financial literacy and job readiness programs for women coming out of difficult situations. They needed a permanent location. We offered them a below-market lease. The irony was not lost on me. My family had spent years telling me my skills were only valuable when they served someone else's ambitions. Now those skills were helping strangers build something that actually lasted. The programs that ran out of that space, the budgeting workshops, the credit counseling sessions, the resume help, were exactly the kind of practical, unglamorous, genuinely useful work that had always been invisible to people like Marcus. I am still a forensic accountant. I have 6 active clients and 2 more in onboarding. I have never once had to ask my family for anything, and I have never once had to compromise my professional obligations for their comfort. Theo proposed last fall on an ordinary Tuesday after dinner, sitting on the back porch, and I said yes before he finished the sentence. "We are getting married in September. Small ceremony. The guest list is short, and every person on it is there because we chose them. My mother called when she heard. She said she hoped she and my father would be invited. I told her I would think about it and let her know. For once in my life, the decision was entirely mine to make. And for once, I was going to take my time making it.